He promised to stay loyal, until his sister-in-law made her confession. Steady ground. Marcus Holloway stood on the cedar deck of his lake house, coffee warming his hands against the autumn chill. The morning fog drifted across the water like ghostly fingers, dissolving as sunlight pierced through the pines. At 42, he had built everything he'd ever wanted. This home, his architecture firm, and 16 years of marriage to Eliza, who still made his heart settle when she entered a room. Thinking deep thoughts again? Eliza's voice came from behind as her arms wrapped around his waist. Her familiar scent of vanilla and sandalwood enveloped him. Just appreciating the view, Marcus said, turning to face her. Eliza's auburn hair caught the morning light, her green eyes crinkling at the corners when she smiled. The design team still wants those revisions by noon? Unfortunately, she sighed. As the marketing director for his firm, Eliza balanced his creative vision with practical reality. They were partners in every sense. And I have that conference in Seattle next week. 3 days this time. Marcus nodded, kissing her forehead. We'll manage. We always do. Later that evening, as Marcus prepared dinner, his specialty risotto that required patient, methodical attention, Eliza paced the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. Of course she can stay with us. Mom, Eliza said, giving Marcus an apologetic look. No, it's no trouble at all. The guest room is always ready. After hanging up, Eliza leaned against the counter. That was about Nix. Marcus raised an eyebrow, stirring the risotto. Nix, Eliza's younger half-sister, was practically a stranger. She'd attended their wedding but had always kept her distance, appearing at family gatherings like a reluctant shadow. Everything okay? Not really. She lost her position at the observatory in Hawaii. Funding cuts. Eliza rubbed her temples. She needs a place to stay while figuring out her next move. Mom suggested here since we have the space and, well, I couldn't say no. Of course not, Marcus agreed, though something unsettled him about having their peaceful routine disrupted. How long? A month, maybe 2, just until she finds another research position. 3 days later, Marcus stood awkwardly in the driveway as Eliza embraced her sister. Nix Talon was nothing like he remembered. Gone was the shy teenager with hunched shoulders. The woman before him stood tall and composed, with striking violet eyes, a genetic rarity she'd inherited from her father, and midnight black hair cut in a sharp bob that accentuated her high cheekbones. Thank you for having me, Nix said, her voice low and melodious as she extended her hand to Marcus. Her grip was firm, confident. I promise not to intrude for long. Family doesn't intrude, Marcus replied automatically, though the word family felt strange when applied to this almost stranger. That first evening was a study in polite distance. Nix spoke primarily to Eliza, answering Marcus's questions with brief, precise sentences. She was an astrophysicist specializing in exoplanet atmospheres. Yes, finding a new position would be challenging. No, she wasn't seeing anyone currently. Later, as Marcus and Eliza prepared for bed, he caught his wife watching him with a curious expression. What? He asked. Nothing, Eliza smiled. I just realized you and Nix have never really talked before. She's brilliant but guarded. Always has been. She seems intense, Marcus offered. Give her time, Eliza said, sliding under the covers. She's different once you know her. That night, Marcus woke to the sound of quiet movement. Glancing at the clock, 3:17 a.m., he slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Eliza. Downstairs, a slim silhouette stood at the glass doors facing the lake. Nix, wrapped in an oversized sweater, stared at the star-filled sky reflected in the still water. Trouble sleeping? Marcus asked softly. She didn't startle, as though she'd sensed his presence. Old habits. I've worked nights for years. She turned slightly, moonlight catching her profile. The sky here is remarkable. You can actually see the Milky Way. Something in her voice, a genuine wonder, made Marcus pause beside her, looking upward. One reason we chose this place, away from city lights. For the first time, Nix smiled, a small private gesture. You chose well. Standing together in comfortable silence, Marcus felt an unexpected shift in the atmosphere between them, subtle as a change in barometric pressure before a storm. Something was beginning, though neither of them knew it yet. Shifting foundations. 2 weeks passed, and the lake house settled into a new rhythm. Marcus found himself surprised by how easily Nix integrated into their lives. Unlike Eliza, who filled spaces with warm chatter and spontaneous laughter, Nix moved through rooms with quiet purpose. She spent mornings on the deck with her laptop, analyzing data sent by former colleagues and afternoons helping Marcus with unexpected household projects. "Hand me the Phillips head?" Marcus asked, half buried under the kitchen sink where a persistent leak had developed. Nix placed the screwdriver in his outstretched hand with precision. "You know, I fixed the telescope mount at the observatory myself. Mechanical engineering was my minor." Marcus slid out, eyebrow raised. "And you're just mentioning this now? After I've been struggling for 20 minutes? A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I was curious if you'd figure it out." "And?" "You were close." She knelt beside him, their shoulders nearly touching. "May I?" Working together, they resolved in minutes what would have taken him an hour alone. Marcus found himself watching her hands, steady, capable, with a delicate strength he hadn't expected. Eliza's business trips became more frequent as her firm pursued a major contract. "I feel terrible leaving you both," she said, packing for her third trip in a month. "Don't," Marcus assured her. "We're fine. Nix has been helping me redesign the boathouse." Something flickered across Eliza's face, surprise perhaps, but she smiled. "I'm glad you two are getting along." She's always been so reserved with everyone. After Eliza left, the house felt different. Not emptier, but shifted somehow. One evening, Marcus discovered Nix's collection of classic science fiction novels. "Asimov?" he asked, holding up Foundation. "I wouldn't have pegged you for sci-fi." Nix looked up from her data models. "The best scientists are dreamers first. Besides, my father read these to me as a child." That conversation sparked others. They discovered shared tastes in music, philosophy, and architecture. Marcus found himself lingering in the kitchen after dinner, their discussions flowing from cosmic evolution to Renaissance art, with an ease he rarely experienced with anyone besides Eliza. One night, they sat on the deck beneath a meteor shower, the cool autumn air necessitating blankets and hot cider spiked with whiskey. "Do you ever think about how small we are?" Nix asked, her face tilted skyward. "Those lights traveled billions of years to reach us." "I think about scale all the time," Marcus admitted. "It's fundamental to architecture, how humans relate to space." "Is that why you built this place? To feel connected to something larger?" The question caught him off guard with its insight. "Yes, exactly that." When their eyes met, something electric passed between them, a recognition of kindred understanding. Marcus looked away first, suddenly conscious of the silence stretching between them, filled with things neither dared articulate. The following Sunday, Marcus suggested taking the boat out. The lake sparkled under clear skies, and Nix, typically reserved, seemed lighter away from shore. She trailed her fingers through the water, face turned to the sun, the wind tangling her dark hair. "You should laugh more often," Marcus said without thinking when a spray of water made her giggle unexpectedly. Her violet eyes met his, unguarded for once. "Maybe I just needed the right reason." Later, as he steered them homeward, Nick stood beside him at the wheel, pointing out a blue heron along the shoreline. When the boat hit unexpected wake, she stumbled against him, her hand catching his arm for balance. The contact lasted only seconds, yet Marcus felt it like a brand against his skin. That night, he stared at the ceiling while Eliza slept peacefully beside him, troubled by the realization that he'd spent the entire day without thinking of his wife once, and even more troubled by the way his pulse had quickened when Nick stood close. He was treading dangerous waters, and the shore was drifting further away with each passing day. Fault lines. The storm arrived without warning. What began as gentle rain intensified into a tempest by nightfall, with lightning fracturing the sky and thunder that seemed to shake the foundation of the house. Marcus checked the weather alert on his phone, frowning. "Power outages reported across the county," he told Nix, who was curled in an armchair with one of her books. "We should prepare just in case." Eliza was in Chicago for another 3 days, leaving them alone to weather the storm. As they gathered candles, flashlights, and extra blankets, the lights flickered once, twice, then plunged the house into darkness. "Perfect timing," Nix's voice came from somewhere to his left. In the living room, they built a fire in the stone hearth, a precaution against the dropping temperature. Outside, rain lashed against windows like desperate fingers seeking entry, while wind howled through the pines. Inside, the firelight cast long shadows, turning the familiar space intimate and strange. They sat on the floor near the hearth, a respectful distance between them, sharing a bottle of red wine Marcus had opened to accompany the simple dinner of bread and cheese, all they could manage without power. "Tell me something you've never told Eliza," Nix said suddenly, her face half illuminated by dancing flames. Marcus looked up sharply. "That's a dangerous question." "Is it?" Her gaze was steady, challenging. "I'm curious about the parts of yourself you keep hidden." He should have changed the subject. Instead, he heard himself say, "I sometimes wonder if I deserve her. If I'm enough." Nix's expression softened. "Why wouldn't you be?" Eliza sees the world in vibrant colors. She connects with people effortlessly. "I'm more," he gestured vaguely, "measured, thoughtful," Nix suggested. "Those aren't flaws, Marcus." The way she said his name like she was tasting it sent an involuntary shiver through him. The fire crackled in the silence that followed, sparks ascending the chimney like fleeing stars. "Your turn," he finally said. Nix swirled the wine in her glass, watching the liquid catch the firelight. "I didn't come here just because I lost my position." Her voice had dropped so low he had to lean forward to hear. "I came because I needed to face this, to face you." "Face me?" Marcus's pulse quickened. "I don't understand. I've been running from it for years." She set down her glass, her hands slightly unsteady. "The reason I could barely speak at your wedding. The reason I've stayed away from family gatherings. The reason I took a position literally on the most isolated island chain in the world." The realization dawned slowly, inexorably, like a tide rising against a seawall destined to breach. "I fell in love with you the first time Eliza brought you home," Nix continued, her voice a whisper now. "Before you ever noticed her, you asked me about the book I was reading. No one had ever done that before. You listened like my words mattered." Marcus sat frozen, unable to speak or move. The confession hung between them. Dangerous as live wire in floodwater, I tried to stop it. "For 16 years I've tried." Her voice broke slightly. "I dated other men. I built a career. I convinced myself it was just a silly infatuation. But seeing you again, being here," she closed her eyes. "I needed to say it once, to stop hiding from it. I don't expect anything. I just—" "Nix!" His voice sounded strange to his own ears. "We can't have this conversation." "I know." Her smile was sad, resigned. "I'm not asking for anything. Tomorrow we can pretend this never happened. I just needed the truth to exist somewhere outside my own head." The fire popped loudly, sending a shower of sparks upward. Marcus stood abruptly, needing distance, air, perspective. He moved to the window, watching rain stream down glass turned mirror-like by the darkness outside. In the reflection, he could see Nix still sitting by the fire, her silhouette small and vulnerable. What terrified him wasn't her confession. It was his response to it. Not shock or discomfort, but recognition. A dangerous resonance. The unspoken realization that something had been building between them since the moment she arrived. Like two instruments inadvertently tuned to the same frequency. "I should go upstairs," he said, not trusting himself to say more. Nix nodded, not looking at him. "Good night, Marcus." He paused at the threshold, the weight of unspoken words heavy on his tongue. "In another life," he began, then stopped himself. Some doors, once opened, could never be closed again. That night, lying in the dark, listening to the storm gradually subside, Marcus faced the truth he'd been avoiding. The foundation of everything he'd built his life upon had shifted beneath his feet, and he didn't know if anything would ever stand steady again. Tremors. The morning after the storm broke with cruel brightness, sunlight streaming through windows as if to illuminate what both Marcus and Nix were desperate to keep in shadow. They moved around each other with careful distance. Their conversation reduced to practical matters. The power had returned. Branches needed clearing from the yard. The roof required checking for damage. When Eliza called to say her flight would arrive that evening, Marcus felt equal parts relief and dread. The house had become a confessional, holding secrets in its walls he wasn't sure he could conceal. "You seem distracted," Eliza said later that night, unpacking her suitcase while Marcus sat on the edge of the bed. "Everything okay with you two while I was gone?" "Fine," he answered too quickly. "Just the storm. Lost power for a while." Eliza paused, studying him with the perceptiveness that had always made her excellent at her job. "Marcus," she said gently, "you know you can tell me anything." Could he? The question echoed in his mind as he pulled her close, burying his face in her hair, seeking the familiar comfort of her presence. That night he made love to his wife with desperate intensity, as if physical connection could erase the emotional betrayal he already felt guilty of. The following weeks unfolded in a strange choreography of avoidance. Nick spent more time away from the house, claiming to be using the university library for job research. When all three were together, she maintained flawless politeness, never giving Eliza reason to suspect anything amiss. Yet Marcus caught the flash of pain in her eyes whenever their gazes accidentally met, a mirror to his own confusion. "I found a position," Nix announced one evening during dinner. "The European Southern Observatory in Chile, Chile." Eliza set down her fork. That's wonderful, but so far." "A fresh start," Nick said, carefully not looking at Marcus. "They need someone immediately. I'll be leaving next week." Later, Marcus found himself alone with Nix in the kitchen, the first time they'd been without Eliza's buffer presence since the night of the storm. "You don't have to leave," he said quietly, helping her dry dishes. "Yes, I do." Her hands were steady, methodical. "For all our sakes. What happened, what you said, and was unfair to you," she finished. "I've spent years carrying this. I shouldn't have made it your burden, too." Marcus set down the towel. "And if I told you I felt it too, this connection between us?" Nix finally looked at him, her violet eyes searching his face. "Then I'd tell you it doesn't matter. You love Eliza. You've built a life with her. Whatever this is between us, it's just gravity pulling at objects that can never collide without destruction." Before he could respond, the kitchen door swung open as Eliza entered with a bottle of wine. "We should celebrate Nix's new position properly," she announced, her smile bright but her eyes watchful. Eliza organized a small farewell gathering the weekend before Nix's departure. Friends from Marcus's firm and Eliza's college days filled the lake house with conversation and laughter. Marcus found himself watching Nix across rooms. The way she smiled politely at strangers' questions, the careful distance she maintained from him. During a lull in the party, he found himself alone on the deck. Footsteps approached, and he knew without turning it was Nix. "You should go inside," he said. "It's your party." "I needed air." She stood beside him, both of them looking out at the lake rather than at each other. "I leave tomorrow morning. Eliza's driving me to the airport." "I know." "Marcus." Her voice held a question she didn't complete. When he finally turned to her, something broke inside him, restraint perhaps, or the pretense that what existed between them was simple or controllable. His hand moved of its own volition, fingertips brushing her cheek in the gentlest of touches. "In another life," he whispered, completing the sentence he'd left unfinished that stormy night. The sliding door opened suddenly. They stepped apart instantly, but not quickly enough. Eliza stood framed in the doorway, her expression transforming from surprise to understanding in the space of a heartbeat. "Eliza," Marcus began, but she held up a hand. "Not here," she said quietly. "Not now." The party continued, a surreal facade over the fracture that had just occurred. Marcus watched his wife move through groups of friends, laughing and pouring wine, her social grace intact while something fundamental had just shattered between them. Later that night, after guests had departed and Nix had retreated to her room to finish packing, Eliza faced Marcus in their bedroom, her composure finally crumbling. "How long?" she asked simply. "Nothing happened," he insisted, though the defense felt hollow even to his own ears. "Don't." Eliza's voice trembled. "I've known something was wrong for weeks. I saw how you look at each other when you think I'm not watching. What I don't understand is why neither of you told me." In that moment, Marcus realized the true extent of his betrayal, not a physical affair, but the emotional intimacy he'd shared with Nix while excluding his wife. The secret connection that had grown in shadow. "I didn't want to admit it to myself," he confessed. "I love you, Eliza, that's never changed. And yet you're in love with my sister, too." The words fell between them like stones into still water, ripples of consequence expanding outward. Solid ground. Dawn broke over the lake in watercolor washes of pink and gold, the beauty a stark contrast to the tension that filled the house. Marcus hadn't slept, spending the night on the couch after hours of painful conversation with Eliza. tears and accusations giving way eventually to exhausted silence. Nix appeared in the living room doorway, suitcases packed beside her. "My cab will be here in 20 minutes, she said quietly. "I wanted to say goodbye." "Eliza knows," Marcus said, rising from the couch. Nix closed her eyes briefly. "I suspected after last night." "Is she upstairs? She said she needs time to think." The sound of footsteps on the stairs made them both turn. Eliza descended slowly, her face pale but composed. She'd clearly been crying, but there was a steadiness to her movements that Marcus recognized, his wife at her most determined. "I'm coming with you to the airport," she told Nix, her voice allowing no argument. "Eliza, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." Eliza looked between them. "But first we're going to talk. All three of us." Honestly, for once, they sat at the kitchen table, the heart of their home now hosting its most difficult conversation. Morning light spilled across the wooden surface where they'd shared countless meals, marking the passage of seconds into minutes with shifting patterns. "I've spent all night trying to understand," Eliza began. "Not just what happened, but why. Why my sister? Why my husband? Why now?" Nix's hands trembled slightly. "I never meant to hurt you. I came here thinking I could finally move past these feelings, not act on them. And you?" Eliza turned to Marcus, her green eyes holding his. "What were you thinking?" Marcus struggled to find words adequate for the complexity of what he felt. "I love you, Eliza. That's my truth, my foundation. What I feel for Nix is different. Not greater or lesser, just different. I didn't plan it or seek it. Love isn't always a choice," Nix said softly. "But what we do about it is. That's why I'm leaving." Eliza was silent for a long moment. "Do you know what hurts the most? Not that you might love each other, but that you both decided what I could or couldn't handle. You made choices for me by keeping this secret." The truth of her words struck them both. In trying to protect Eliza, they'd undermined her agency, the very thing that made her the strong, independent woman they both admired. "What do you want, Eliza?" Marcus finally asked. "Tell me what you want and I'll do it. I want—" She took a deep breath. "I want honesty. I want to know if our marriage is still what you truly want, Marcus. Not out of obligation or history or guilt, but because you choose it. Because you choose me." The question hung in the air, profound in its simplicity. Marcus looked between the two women, his wife of 16 years and the woman who had awoken something unexpected within him. In that moment of perfect clarity, he understood that love wasn't just feeling but action, not just passion but commitment. "I choose you," he said, reaching for Eliza's hand. "I always have. What I feel for Nix is real. But what we've built together is my life's work, my heart's home. I won't throw that away." Tears filled Eliza's eyes, but she didn't withdraw her hand from his. "And you?" she asked Nix. "What do you choose?" "To let go," Nix answered, her voice steadier than it had been in weeks. "To build my own life instead of orbiting around someone else's. I've used these feelings as an excuse to keep distance between myself and the world for too long." The sound of a car horn outside signaled the arrival of Nix's taxi. The three stood, the conversation not finished but perhaps having reached the only resolution possible for now. At the door, Nix embraced her sister with fierce intensity. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I love you. I know," Eliza replied. "We'll talk more. Not now, but someday." When Nix turned to Marcus, they didn't touch. Some boundaries, once recognized, needed to remain unbreached. "Live well," he said simply. "You too," she replied. "Take care of each other." They watched from the porch as the taxi disappeared down the gravel drive, taking with it possibilities that would remain unexplored. When it was gone, Eliza turned to Marcus. "We have work to do," she said, not unkindly. "Yes," he agreed. "We do." They walked together to the end of the dock, sitting side by side with their feet dangling above water, turned to liquid gold in the morning light. Rebuilding would take time. Trust wasn't repaired in a day, but the foundation remained solid beneath them. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Eliza asked after a while. "Yes," Marcus said, believing it. "She's stronger than either of us realized." "And us? Will we be okay?" Marcus took his wife's hand, feeling the familiar contours of her fingers interlaced with his. Some choices were made not once but every day, in small moments of recommitment. in choosing to face hard truths together rather than comfortable lies apart. Yes, he said, we're on solid ground. Across the lake, a blue heron took flight, wings catching the light as it rose against the endless sky. They watched it together, two people who had weathered a storm and emerged changed but unbroken, choosing, despite everything, to build something that would last.